Hi, welcome back to the continuing lecture in simple discount. Um, so now, in our last class, uh, we took a look at the example of uh, discounting non-interest paying promissory note, right? So now, in this segment of the video, we are now going into we're going to discuss discounting interest-bearing notes or interest-paying notes. Now, here's the uh, I've been telling you all along. Simple discount is also called bank discount, right? And it is a procedure or process to negotiate um, the sale of the promissory notes, and um, you normally you negotiated with the bank, but actually um, it's not the bank. I mean, bank could be a party that could be uh, part of this. Bank could buy the promissory notes, but more frequently, it is a financial company called factors, right? Factors, financial companies called factors. And uh, usually these companies are named, something like A, ABC Finance, right? Now, so they generally buy these promissory notes, and not just the promissory notes. And the promissory notes are uh, a part. Promissory notes are a part of accounts receivable. Uh, but there's a slight difference between. But remember, uh, promissory notes and accounts receivable are usually listed as separate line items in the balance sheet. In the current assets section, they are listed uh, as separate line items. And if promissory notes are part of the accounts receivable, uh, I would feel more comfortable to put it as a sub line item of accounts receivable. But they generally write it as separate line items. Why? I'm gonna get to that later, but there's a reason. Uh, there's a and I also told you the promissory notes are also called commercial paper. Now, if you took Finance 100 with me and in the principles of finance with me, you might remember that the name commercial paper is reserved for a certain category of uh, bonds. In other words, a short-term corporate bond. It's called as commercial paper. But then, what? So they are the same thing? Yeah, they are basically the same thing, but the uh, context would be slightly different, right? When you call them promissory notes, and when you call them commercial papers, um, it's in slightly different context. But I'm gonna get to that later. But first of all, so factors, right? Factors like ABC Financial. These are the uh, financial companies that specialize in uh, buying these promissory notes. and discounting it to the the company that is selling these promissory, because the company who sells these promissory notes are, as I said, in a cash flow problem. They have run into a cash flow shortage problem. So they have to. It's better to sell it at discount rather than holding on to it and face potential default, right? So I'm going to come back to this aspect of accounts receivable and factors later. Um, uh, but let's take a look at the since let me finish this. I don't know if I can do this in uh, uh, okay, maybe it will take too much time. So but let me try. So where did the word factor come from then? Where did the word factor come from? Factor is, you might think, oh, it's a factor of something, like um, you you multiply this by the factor of 10, or so factor in English language, of course, factor means we know what it means. Uh, But actually, so you might think, oh, because they are basically discounting it by factor of 0.1, splitting it by zero point 0.1 and by factor of zero point 0.1 and zero point 0.9. That's probably why. No, it has nothing to do with that. Okay. Interestingly, the word factor actually comes from. Let me delete this. It actually comes from the French word facture. Okay, and facture means facture, la facture. Okay, la facture, the la facture. And what does that mean? That means invoice in French. That's invoice. And it's not only in French. There are several European languages that share the same etymology. In Italian, it is like la fattore, I think, la fattore. I'm not going to write the article again because in French and Italian, it's the same uh, feminine, right? La fattore. And Spanish, it would be like factora or something, similar. It's not only in Romance languages. You might think, Italian, French, Italian, Spanish, they would probably have the same. Even in Czechoslovakian, it's actually factura. And Czech is a complete different language group. It's Slavic language, right? Not even Germanic, it's Slavic. And in Czech, it's factura. How do I know? I've been there. A couple of years ago, I went to Prague, Czech Republic, and then I stayed there for a few weeks and rented a car, drove down to Vienna, Austria, and then stayed there, a couple of days, more than almost a week, and then drove down to Budapest, Hungary, Budapest, and of course, when I came back, I came back to Prague, and I had to return the car, right? When I returned a car, of course, when you rent a car, you use, credit cards, so it's prepaid. I mean, so you have already the credit card receipt, so it's already prepaid, so you don't need any invoice. But when, it's just it's just business protocol. When I returned a car, they gave me, what do you think they gave me? Of course, they will give you that, the car is returned, uh, with every, conditions satisfied, right? Car has no damage, no dent, free of any defect, with, full gas tank, and et cetera, right? And then they, as a, final document, that the car was returned, clean and free of any damage, right? Of course, that document, there could be a separate document, stating that, but what I received was saying factura. But then, what's the point? I mean, at that point, I don't need invoice anymore because I already paid when I rent the car with my credit card. I already paid. But this is a protocol, right? Just a business operating protocol. Now, it's not only in Czech, in Dutch. Dutch is Germanic language, and even in that doesn't mean in German it's something similar. German is different. Russian is different. But then in Dutch, it is written, it's factuur, and it is written in more intimidating way. Now, reading this, I mean, just trying to read this is already very intimidating. So, what does this mean? I mean, these words all mean, and then when this came to English language, right? Uh, it got anglicized and then became factor, right? So basically, what does that mean? Factoring is originally a business of buying invoices at discount. Invoices at discount. So what does invoice have to do with it? I mean, wasn't it a promissory note that they were discounting? Actually, I told you, promissory notes are a kind of, accounts receivable. And what's an accounts receivable? Exactly, that's the payment, right? Money you haven't received yet for selling something. You've sold something, you've sold merchandise, but you haven't received payment yet. You haven't collected yet. But that's the concept, that's the idea. So we can easily understand, I mean, because from the semantics of the word, anybody can understand what accounts receivable implies, right? But that's just a concept. What is the proof? What proves that you have claim to money that they owe you? Huh? In other words, promissory notes are not only a concept, but also it is a physical proof by itself. Isn't that right? Promissory note itself is already a physical proof that they owe you money, right? When you have that promissory note issued by someone. But then what is the physical proof of accounts receivable? It's the invoice. Invoice is the physical proof. So invoices generally, have, also, like maturity, right? It says, please pay this. Of course, they generally give, like it's basically like a uh, uh, supplier's credit, right? Supplier's credit. In other words, um, uh, we are selling this merchandise to you, but we are giving you 60 days to pay. Or, to facilitate um, uh, prompt payment, they give generally something like discount for early payment, or but anyway, the physical proof of accounts receivable is invoice. And then remember, what does factor mean? Invoice. So factoring, I told you what is factoring. Factoring was originally a business of buying invoice at discount, hence called, this is simple discount or bank discount is called factoring. If the bank is doing this, it's called bank discount. But I've been telling you, small, mostly, third party, small financial companies are specializing in this, and they are called, factors, right? So now, as an example of discounting, so in this example, we are interest-paying notes. Now we have, oops, I'm sorry. Now we have, this should be called maturity value, not future value, right? That's fine. I mean, future value, maturity value, that's the same thing. But let's think about it. Principal, $300,000 principal, at interest rate of 10% with 180 days to maturity. So this is, I use normally, lowercase t, right? But why uppercase t? Uppercase t means, terminal time. That's the from day zero, time zero, all the way to the time, the last day, the ultimate, terminal time. So uppercase T means represents terminal time. This is the entire time left on this bond or on this note. So if we use, 180 days is half a year, right? So, but I discounted it. Look, I used, 365, right? So this is, exact interest year, right? So I can annotate review. So I will do it later. So then what's the maturity value? Because this is, with interest, all you need to do is, you already know this, principal times 1 plus R times P, right? And then that's the maturity value. But, on day 60, now, how do I, the verbiage, is missing verbiage, but, from the data, I can tell this is the discount period, right? How do I know? The time left, to maturity is 120. What does that mean? For the first 60 days, this company was holding on to this promissory note. Again, for the first 60 days, they thought it's obvious, they didn't have any cash flow shortage problems. So they were hoping to hold it for 180 days and collect, this maturity value. That's, almost, $15,000 more. But on day 61, they can't do it anymore. They ran into a a cash flow shortage, so they ran to the bank or a factor, and then they factored it, right? They factored it. They factored this promissory note, and the discount rate the factor used was 12%. Discount rate they used was 12%. So then 120 days is, converting into years, 0.33. So what's the proceeds, right? Once again, D, proceeds, the discounted amount. Then all you need to do is you will be, because this is the maturity value, you will be discounting, but the discount period is 120 days. And so 1 minus, right? The discount rate is 12% times T, right? And then what do you get? This is what you receive. This is the proceeds. And then what's the bank discount? Bank discount will be the difference between, you can calculate it separately, right? Like maturity value times D times T. But we know what we got this already, so it's the difference between the two, clearly. And bank takes this for their service, right? They have to get something from this because they are taking over this promissory note. And unless the issuer of the promissory note is, very high quality, right? The risk, there's a lot of risk, right? So they will have to cover there. And then, good. What is this? I'm gonna have to come back to this later. This is called, effective interest rate. Effective interest rate. Okay, effective interest rate. But I will have to come back to that later. Next example. So just $100. That's two. Let's make it $1,000. $10,000 at least. Okay. So once again, this doesn't have to be only promissory note. This can be also an invoice, but in most cases, invoices don't have interest. So in most cases, invoices would be like discounting invoices would be like non-interest discounting non-interest promissory note. Okay, but anyway, so the maturity, the entire duration, length of this note is 90 days from day 1 to the terminal time, right? Of course, this time they used ordinary interest here, right? So we don't have to do that again. You can just copy that, right? And discount rate is 18%, and 40 days with 40 days remaining. So what does that mean? For the first 50 days, they were holding on to it, right? And then they ran into cash flow problem, cash flow shortage. So they ran to the bank or factor and discounted it. And 40 days is, of course, using ordinary interest here. That's what it is. And you don't have to do all of this again. So you will just drag it down, and this is the proceeds, and this is the the bank discount. Now, last but not least, I always say, um, uh, what's important is the also uh, the housekeeping, right? I don't want to leave it like this, so use, I will make, right, the bottom border. And this doesn't look good, so I'm gonna no border, no border, but then this doesn't look good, so I'm gonna put bottom border, thick bottom border. Okay, now, now this side border, that I don't like that, but I'm gonna take care of that later because we still have a couple of things. Now here, we have now we need to understand what effective interest rate is. But actually, the exercise will be doing the exercise on the exercise on the effective interest rate in the next uh, uh, video. But you might think, oh, so back to this our first example, uh, zero non-interest paying promissory note. So in that case, suppose ignore 60 days. That was what we did. Ignore 60 days. Suppose if principal was 10K, and you factored it and you got 9K. So that means the bank discount was 1K, 1,000, right? Then what would you say? Does that mean bank, the interest rate in this case, the bank took, does that mean that means discount rate was 10%, right? Isn't that right? Discount rate was 10%. But then this 1,000 is like the interest that the bank takes, right? But then is it 10? So was the interest rate 10% then? I mean, for the bank, bank took the interest up front, right? I mean, they are paying you 9,000 out of 10,000. So it's like giving you a $10,000 loan, but they took the interest of 1,000 up front and only gave you 9,000, right? And then if you it's like a pawn, it's like a pawnbroker. You took a $10,000 Rolex watch to a pawnbroker, and they gave you only 9,000. If you want the $10,000 watch again, they took 1,000 for their fee or interest. So they are telling you, you want it back? Bring us back 10,000. You will get. So I don't know if this is a good analogy, but I normally call this type 2 loan. But think about it. So they took $1,000 interest out of 10,000. So the interest rate, and you is the interest rate 10%? Hmm? Actually, 10% is discount rate, isn't that right? But from your perspective, right? From your perspective, you paid 1,000 interest for borrowing $9,000, isn't that right? For borrowing $9,000. So what does this mean? For, let's say, 1 year, for 1 year. So in terms of interest rate, right? You paid 1K to borrow 9K for 1 year. You don't have to write 1 year here, but you remember R is, right, from, where did I write it? I think I erased it. You remember the this formula, right? If you want to find R, it's interest over P times T. So if you do that, this is the interest you paid, and this is the for using 9,000, for borrowing 9,000 for 1 year. You don't have to write one, but for 1 year. So if you do this, then is this 10%? No, it actually comes to something like 11.11 percent, 11.11. In other words, effectively, think about it. If you paid $1,000 to borrow 9,000 for 1 year, you paid effectively 11.11%, not 10% interest, right? It's like receiving, you wanted to borrow 10,000, but, right, you paid, they gave you 10,000, but they took 1,000 upfront as interest, right? So it is 11.11, right? So this is called effective interest rate, right? So we're going to talk about the effective interest rate in the next video. Okay, all right. I'll see you guys in the next video. Stop recording.